Anna, let me know when everybody is in from the waiting room. I can't see that for some reason.
I think we can start in about 20 seconds or so.
Okay. Welcome to our program tonight, sponsored by Club L'Chaim of Adath Israel and Four Elms Retirement Residence. We are very excited and honored to have Dr. Adriana Schnell with us this evening as she explores the sandwich generation, caring for ourselves while caring for others. Our program tonight will be recorded. Jody?
Hi, everybody. I am honored to be here helping and sponsoring this wonderful talk this evening. My name is Jody. For those of you who don't know me, I'm from Four Elms Retirement Residence, and I'm the Community Relations Manager. So we invite you to give me a call anytime. We're here to help support you with any questions and to discover what your choices and options are with retirement living. And we are located at Steeles and Dufferin. We have one really great promotion going on right now for November. So if you do call in and book a tour, we are giving away $25 ultimate dining gift cards for everybody who comes in from a tour between now and the end of November. And I just want to give a shout out to all of our wonderful residents over at Four Elms, because I know that they're watching tonight. Hey, everybody.
Our speaker, Dr. Adriana Schnell, is Program Director of Koshitsky Center for Innovations in Caregiving, Baycrest Health Sciences. Before that, she was Manager and Professional Practice Chief for Social Work and Manager for the Koshitsky Family Caregiving Center, Senior Counseling and Referral and Senior Support Program at Baycrest. She has had 30 years of clinical experience working with older adults and families. Dr. Schnell is recipient of the Baycrest Outstanding Innovations Award. She is also assistant professor and teaches at the Factor in Wentish Faculty of Social Work and is instructor for the Life Course in Aging at U of T. She is chair of Caregiving Committee for the National Initiative for the Care of the Elderly. She is a member of the Ontario Caregiver Coalition, the Toronto Caregiver Coalition, and Ontario Health Team's Caregiving Working Group. Dr. Schnell integrates clinical practice, education, research, and leadership experience to support healthcare providers and caregivers. Dr. Schnell, we anxiously await your presentation.
Thank you very much, Carol, for that warm welcome. And it's my pleasure and honor to be back speaking with you again. I was looking at my notes and I met with you in June to talk about coping with dementia. And today we're going to talk about the sandwich generation, but there are a lot of overlaps in that at the end of the day, a lot of what I usually talk about is dealing with family caregivers. So that's the undertone of everything. That a lot of the work that I do, that I've been doing, I've been at Baycrest well over 32 years by now. I feel like I'm aging in place. And it's been a great place for me to grow and do a lot of the work that I so love. And part of what I love doing is talking with people, lecturing, learning from people around the challenges and the exciting things that happen to all of us by being human and being caregivers. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to talk for about, I'm trying to keep for about 40 minutes or so. And then I'll open it up for questions. And if you have questions and you don't want to wait till then, write them in the chat function already so that we don't lose them or that you don't forget what you wanted to ask at a particular time, because we'll go over those as well. So today I want to talk to you about the sandwich generation and what that is, and do very practical strategies, 5 coping strategies on how do we make the best of it and thrive through it. And then we'll do the Q&A. So when we're part of the sandwich generation, and in fact, when we're part of living in community and with family, there's always this pressure for all of us, our families, finances, caregiving, COVID-19, work, all the multiple roles that we all have and the responsibilities. And I say this, but I'm also very mindful for some of you, as people age and the roles get more diminished, we long. I was having this conversation with my mom actually, and I call my mom every day, and I was saying to her, I have to do this, and today I was up at 6 and I was doing this, and then I have to do this. And she said to me, my family calls me Addie. Addie, just be lucky. Just think how lucky you are that you have so many roles, responsibilities, and things you do that you enjoy. And then my kid, my grandchild, I was just going on and on to my mom. And it dawned on me, when we talk about reframing our stressors, that I am so lucky that I have all of these roles, responsibilities, layers of complexities and relationships in my life. That doesn't mean that they're not stressful. So we've all heard about the sandwich generation, and it was a term coined by Dorothy Miller, who was a social worker in 1981, to describe those people that are caught between usually conflicting demands of looking after children and caring for older adults. And the sandwich generation, I want to normalize it for all of us. There's nothing pathological, nothing wrong with it. Is normal. It's part of the life cycle. But that's different than what we talk about compound caregiving, which is when we're providing care to perhaps elderly parents who are frail and older or may have a dementia, and also children that have mental health issues, physical issues, or have special needs. So those are different, they're related concepts, but they're different. I have to tell you something funny. I have to go back to that because when I look at that picture, I can only say this within a Jewish congregation setting. When you go online to look at pictures of sandwich generation, they're all ham and cheese for whatever reason. So I was very mindful to make sure that it was just cheese. But I mean, that's only something that we would think about. Anyway, I digress. So when I talk about sandwiches, I like to talk about all kinds of different sandwiches. And I call the traditional sandwich is like, this is the typical sandwich generation, 40 to 60s, and you're dealing with parents and children and sometimes adult children. And then there's another term, grand sandwich, with at least you're looking after a grandchild and at least one parent or parent-in-law. And then there's the open sandwich when you're just looking at, not just, but looking after parents. And then I was reading some of the literature and they talk about the panini sandwich, which is older adults pressed between their own aging needs and adult children's needs, the spouse's needs or sibling needs. But it's adding the complexity of as we age and have our own issues, and we're still doing these caregiving things. And then there's a club sandwich, which is looking after children, parents, and spouses. And then I like to call it triple decker, which is any combination of these, but like somebody like me and some of you, we also do this as part of our work life. So we never escape caregiving. And so what happens is that we are all very thinly spread, no matter where we're at in this sandwich concoction. In Canada, of all caregivers, and there's about 8.1 million caregivers, 28% of those are in those what we call sandwich generation, and that they're caught between looking after different generations. 50% of those are female, but I'm going to talk about it a bit later because that makes it sound like it's almost the same. Men and women are caregivers. And although that's true, it's not quite like that. 56, so the majority of caregivers are over the age of 45 or older. And people over 65 or older are the ones that are most likely to provide the longest amount and hours of care. And then people that provide 75% of those 45 to 65 in the sandwich generation are the ones that are providing elder care. And if you add to the complexity of those, 75% are also working outside the home. So this sandwich generation, the looking after generations, is compounded with the stresses of work and everything else. And I was hearing this professor from Carleton University that said, Linda Duxbury, saying that I would say very clearly, elder care is the new childcare. And given our demographics now, this is going to become more and more an issue. I just want to go back to the issue about women and caregiving, because even though statistically in Canada, 54% of women are caregivers, which means that 46% are men, and it makes it look like it's similar. It really isn't, because women tend to take on more of the care in terms of childcare responsibilities when both parents are in the labor force. And so when Statistics Canada counts people, men will say, yes, I'm a caregiver. But the reality is it's still women doing the bulk of the work. And the same is true for elder care. There's also two schools of thought when we talk about the sandwich generation. There's some research that says that really being part of the sandwich generation, people don't feel any more rushed or stressed than anyone else, because those negative effects of caregiving are balanced with increased self-esteem. And for some people, this is true. However, the majority of people it's more work for them. There's consequences in terms of health, more stress, and really an inability to find a balance in life. Notice that the sandwich only has cheese only. Okay, so there's a lot of studies and literature on this. There's an Israeli study who really looked a lot about this sandwich generation. And overall, even though there's some benefits to it, people that are in the sandwich generation, meaning as opposed to those caring for children only or only older adults or non-caregivers altogether, they were more likely to experience increased depressive symptoms and a decrease in their health status. So, what are some of the things that influence this experience? And by influence, I mean, for those people that experience it as more of a positive thing as opposed to a negative experience. And this is just a few things I'm mentioning. Of course, this is multifactorial and very complex. But one of the things we look at is reciprocity. So if I look after my parents, but it feels like it's a one-way street, that my parents resent me, they feel that I'm invading their privacy, they feel that I'm controlling, I feel like I'm fighting them on everything, and I feel that I get no benefit from it other than aggravation, that's going to impact my level of stress around looking after them. When it comes to children, it's not reciprocal in the way that we raise our children, but the reciprocity comes in the love that we feel, the good times that we have as parents or grandparents, And so there is a reciprocity in terms of we, provide care, and we give of ourselves, but we're giving of ourselves for a generation that is the future. What's different with older adults is we do a lot and a lot for our kids, but our kids grow up and eventually, hopefully, if we're lucky, they become independent. Whereas when we're providing care for parents and in-laws and older adults, most likely that's not going to be that we look after them and they become independent. I mean, if they have a fractured hip and then they heal and they're fine, that's different. But for most conditions and most people, their health condition will start going down and become more dependent. So it's a very different kind of give and take. The other thing is a lot of people in the sandwich generation, especially, we saw this during COVID, it was that there was an increase on social isolation people in their 40s, 60s even. You have to look after your kids, after your older parents. You don't want to see too many people because you're going to bring COVID to the home, to your elderly parents or people that are frail and your kids. So it means that more and more people have become isolated through this process, but this was true even before COVID. The other thing we need to consider is the dynamics of the relationships prior to even doing this caregiving business. So if I never got along with my mom, having to look after her now is going to be the icing on the cake. I'll do it because it's my duty, filial responsibility, and it's something I would do. But I do it more as something I must do, as opposed to I really want to do this. If the relationships were really good and healthy, this makes the caregiving and being part of a sandwich generation a lot more pleasant and a lot less stressful. Because it's not stressful for me to look or help my parents or my in-laws, because I get some joy out of it as well. And I remember the good times when my in-laws looked after my children when they were young, and I'm so thankful they did that so that I could work. And so now I feel I'm so happy to be able to do this for them. Those relationships that are more ambivalent are the most difficult. So when things are really bad, you have a horrible relationship with your father, you've known this all along, you're doing this out of duty, that's fine. But it's those relationships where you have these ambivalent relationships, like he was a horrible man, I didn't agree with what he did, he didn't do the best by me, but I still felt close to him. And I'm angry, but I love him. Those kinds of relationships make it more difficult to caregive. If I have a sibling that I have a conflictual relationship and now I'm supporting them, that makes it difficult. With children, generally, it tends to be that we put up with a lot with our children and we're very tolerant of a lot of things. So we may be angry with our kids, but when they need us, we're there for them. The other piece that will influence the experience is the age and stage in life we're in. So if I'm 40 and my career is very important and I want to spend time working, but now I have to stop or give up my job or cut back part-time to look after family, I may be more resentful than if I'm 65 and I'm going to retire anyway, and now I can do more caregiving things. I may be resentful because I was planning when I retired, I was going to travel and I was going to do this and that, but it's more compatible with my stage in life than if I were 40 and I wanted to go back to school or whatever I may have wanted, plans I had. And finally, and we can't forget, it's the financial implications. Being in the sandwich generation, especially in this day and age, is very expensive. We have children that are not children, they're adults that still need parents financially, because if you live in Toronto, the cost of living in Toronto is crazy and they can't make it. So we have parents in the sandwich generation providing support for children, for grandchildren. And by support, I mean emotional and time and babysitting, and then giving them money. And then we have parents that perhaps need a retirement home, and that's expensive. And they need a live-in caregiver, and that's expensive. So there are a lot of also financial implications to being in the sandwich generation. The other things we need to consider are the types of care. They make a difference. So it's very different if I have to go to my dad's once a week to mow the lawn because he can't do it, as opposed to have to do shopping and cooking and help with his laundry and medication management. Care, physical care, more intimate care is more difficult to do than transportation if I have to take my mother to the doctors. And the other piece that's really important is the intensity of the care we provide. So mowing the lawn may take me an hour a week in the summer only. But if I have to help somebody with doing their medications 3 times a day, that's very different in terms of my stress level, the time commitment. And so generally we talk about low intensity of care tends to be 8 hours a month, and high intensity, it's 8 hours a month. But this is what the literature, what the research shows. But intuitively, we know that it's not that easy. More than 8 hours is high intensity, less than 8 hours. It depends. It depends on so many factors. Because if we have issues, health issues of our own, the less than 8 hours a month may feel or be a lot more stressful than for somebody who can delegate things, somebody who finances is not an issue and can coordinate and pay people to do things for them. And this is just very quickly, just to show you, in the sandwich generation of those people that are also working, what are the most stressful things? And what they are is, can you see when I go like this with my mouse? Or no? Yeah. So things like finances are a real stressor. Change in social activities. So you may not be able to go out, see your friends, and do your own things because now you're constrained by your duties. People have to change holiday plans. We've heard this all the time. I can't travel anymore because my parents' health is unstable and I'm afraid to go away for too long. For people in terms of work, their ability to work, increase hours, people have to reduce hours, and the opportunities for promotion are decreased. And the burden is generally moderate, little to moderate. But as I've said before, it's not all bad being in the sandwich generation. And we've all, most of us have experienced this. And one of the positive outcomes could be improved relationships as a result of it. Finding your superhero, realizing, oh my God, I can't believe I can manage this well. Kind of feeling proud of the fact that you could do some things that you didn't think were possible. If it's a good opportunity to feel like we're giving back and that we have purpose, and it makes us feel competent. But most of us are not either, negative or positive benefits. It's a continuum. And sometimes there's some benefits, and sometimes it's very stressful, and it depends. And nothing is black or white. So now that I've, sorry, I just keep looking at the time because I have this, I tend to just go on and talking. So how do we manage? How do we look after ourselves? And I'm just going to talk about 5 different things, some techniques and tips for you to think about. And you can apply this, not even if you're not part of a sandwich generation. These are techniques that we can use, all of us, in life in general. And I'm going to start with sharing with you what we know about coping styles. And we all tend to have a particular coping style, but it's not fixed. We cope differently in different situations with different people. And they're generally, we talk about, there's 3 types of coping styles. One we call problem focused, one emotion focused, and one avoidance. And I'll share with you these 3 different types of coping styles and how we can adapt them to help ourselves manage situations better. So having a problem-focused approach is really when we attempt to change that which is causing us stress. So for example, I'm very stressed that my children's daycare closes at 6 o'clock and I don't finish work till 6 o'clock. So a problem focused style of solving the problem would be, I'm going to hire a babysitter to pick up the kids at 6, to be home with the kids till 7 until I get home. So there's we see a problem, we find a solution, and it's my theory, my philosophy in life that I hold very dear to. I believe in it, is that every problem has a solution other than death, and that even when the solutions are not appealing to us, they're solutions. But they're solutions, even if it's changing our attitude. So problem-focused coping styles is really an ideal. We have a problem, we deal with it. But the issue is that we're not robots and we have feelings, and it's easier said than done. Sometimes when we're overwhelmed, we can't think clearly, and sometimes the solutions feel like they're too hard for us to reach, or that they're unattainable, or that they're not workable for us. Another type of coping is what we call emotion-focused coping. And here, we really try to attempt to change our negative emotions. So for example, I'm really upset that my mom, I wanted to take her to the doctor, and she asked me to take her to the doctor, and I get there, and she decides she's not going to go to the doctor. And I took time off work, and I go pick her up, and she says, I changed my mind, I'm not going. And so I'm furious. It's like, why didn't you call me before? I had to leave work. I'm just ruminating and angry and really upset with the situation. So, an emotion-focused approach, we try to regulate our emotions. So, for example, I try to reframe, to think, instead of being so angry and experiencing these negative emotions, I tell myself, at the end of the day, I tried my best as a daughter. I did what my mom wanted. She changed her mind. It's her prerogative. And try not to get so excited about things. Generally, when we deal with aging parents, older adults, children that don't do what we want to do, and all kinds of scenarios like that, emotions are triggered for all of us. And so an emotion-focused approach, and I'll explain some of these examples soon, is an easier approach. It's kind of like making a lemonade out of lemons approach to life. So there may not be a solution per se to the problem, but our attitudes about it we change our attitudes so that we can manage our emotions and not feel so stressed all the time. And finally, a third type of coping style is avoidance. So we try to avoid the stressor, we become distracted, disengaged, or we're in denial. And like, so we drink when we're upset. You have kids playing video games till crazy hours of the night instead of doing homework, gambling, people doing all kinds of behaviors that are that for temporarily make us not be so aware of our pain, but they don't work long term. And these three approaches, people say this is better, this is worse. I don't believe none of them are better or worse. They all have a particular role to play. When we're dealing with something, we're really upset or in shock, or we can't start problem solving right away. Our emotions are really at the surface. And the only way we cope for somebody could be like, I just need a glass of wine and I need to unwind, and I'm not going to deal with any phone calls, and I don't want anybody calling me. And that's okay. This is what I need today. At another times, I may become really, I'm going to give you a very personal example. So, as I was writing this, so my father died unexpectedly 2 weeks ago. And it's been a shock for me because it was unexpected, because he was still living on his own and driving and had a full life, and he died in his sleep, which is what he would have wanted. So I was thinking to myself, that saying, those who do teach, what is it? Those who can't do teach or something. I don't know. So I was thinking, I talk about this all the time, but how do I cope? How have I been coping? And I've used all these three approaches within an hour. So sometimes I totally disconnect, or I'm in denial. I still think I'm just going to call my dad. And even though I know he's dead, I'm in denial. Or I become disengaged. People try to call me, Addie, come out or do this. I'm like, leave me alone. Or I'll watch a movie and just be totally distracted. So I use avoidance because at this time it's helpful for me. If I did this over the long term, that would be really problematic because there's a lot that needs to be done that I would not be doing. I use emotion focus too. So I start feeling guilty. I should have known he wasn't feeling well. I should have taken him to the doctor. And I start kind of ruminating about that stuff. And then I try to talk myself out of it. I go, Addie, you spoke to him the night before. He seemed okay. There was no reason for you to believe that you needed to take him, to do this. So I'm using emotion-focused strategies like that. I'm just talking myself, reframing the situation, because I don't want to feel guilty, because it feels horrible to feel guilty about it. So I'm regulating my emotions. And I've also used problem-focused approach, where initially it's like, okay, we have to go to the lawyers, we have to do this, we have to do that. There's just so many things to get done. And solving problems continuously. Okay, with the house, we need to do that. And I'm in a problem-solving mode where I do. What's not healthy about that is that then I don't have an opportunity to focus on my emotions, which I need to. I know that. I'm a social worker, but it's too painful, right? And so then I disengage. I'm telling you this story, not to overshare, but just to say that in theory that these approaches and what we do, but the reality is that all of us use all of these approaches at all times. And it's important to keep that in mind so we're not judging ourselves and saying we should be problem solving. And a lot of people, so a lot of sandwich generation caregivers, and I hate saying this and generalizing, but men in particular, is they get into this problem-solving mode. We're going to do this, and we're going to do that, and let's do that, and then do that, and the problems are solved. And they're not solved that way. Some of the problems are solved, but the emotions have to have their space as well. So the coping styles are important for us to think about. How are we managing this stress? The stress of being in a sandwich generation, but we can apply it to anything in life. The next thing is talking about our feelings, the way we think, and our behaviors. And they're all interrelated. And one is not more important than the other. And this is also related to coping styles. So this is an easy exercise that you can all do. Write or think about what happened, an instance. So for example, your daughter has not called you in a week, and you're feeling, so when I look at the corner, like feeling, what happened is your daughter hasn't called you for a week. You're really stressed because you've been looking after your mother. You feel you have no support. So what actually happened is your daughter hasn't called you for a week. How are you feeling? You're feeling not loved. You're feeling forgotten. You're feeling taken for granted, whatever it is that you're feeling. What are you thinking? Are you thinking she is busy with her children and her family? Are you thinking something bad's happened to her? Are you thinking, I mean, there's so many ways we could, depending on the situation, we can think all kinds of things given the event that your daughter hasn't called you for a week. And finally, what are you doing about it? What behavior do you do? So how we handle it is different. I could call my daughter and say, I haven't heard from you for a week. I'm wondering if everything's okay. Or I could say, I haven't heard from you for a week. You're so selfish, you're not thinking of me. And think of the differences of how my daughter would feel with those two different messages. One, I'm being concerned for her. My behavior is of concern towards her. Are you okay? It's not like you not to call me for a week. The other one is accusatory. You haven't called me for a week. I'm being self-centered about it. All this to say is we need to really pay attention to when things happen. How are we feeling about them? What are we thinking about it? And what are we doing about it? And we're generally not very good at being objective. We personalize everything. So if my daughter doesn't call me, there must be something wrong with me. Instead of asking, is there anything, what's happening? Is there anything going on? And when we do this, it helps us with our relationships. And when we talk about sandwich generation, is about those relationships that causes grief and stress. And here's another way of thinking about it. When an event happens, what do you tell yourself about it? So something happens. This is what I don't like about Zoom, because if we're all together, I would look at people's hands and people would give me their own personal examples. But I'm going to go back to the same example. Something happens. My daughter doesn't call me for a week. What are my thoughts? She doesn't love me. How do I feel? I feel lonely. I feel unappreciated. And what do? I withdraw even more. Now I for sure don't want to call her because I'm feeling like she doesn't really want to speak to me. And I talk myself into this crazy mindset of she didn't call me, she doesn't love me, I'm not worthy. And I'm just not going to call her. I'm going to wait for her to call me. Instead of, my daughter hasn't called me for a week, I tell myself, she must be so stressed. She has so much on her plate. I feel compassion for her. I remember those days when I had a young family and work and so much on my plate. I'm going to call her and offer if there's something I can do for her. Like, could I take the kids or could I babysit Saturday night so her and her husband can go out? And look at the difference. At the end of the day, we may not know why my daughter didn't call me. And yet we've created stories with totally different outcomes. So give yourselves the benefit of the doubt and create a more positive outcome. That's a very helpful technique. Sorry, I'm just, okay. One of the hard things is, counselors, social workers, therapists will tell you, be aware of your feelings. That's easier said than done. Sometimes we don't know how we're feeling. We're just anxious, we have angst, but we can't really label what it is that we're feeling. And so sometimes when we feel depressed or irritable or angry, we feel it in our bodies. We have trouble sleeping, we feel exhausted, we have health problems. And so we may not be aware that we're depressed or angry or whatever that may be, but we just have back pain and we're exhausted and we feel like we're in a cloud. And so sometimes we need to learn, not sometimes, it's very helpful to learn how our bodies talk to us and what these symptoms could mean. And sometimes when we're frustrated or angry, we have shortness of breath, we feel we have a knot in our throats, or we have stomach cramps or chest pains or headaches, or we overeat, or we're undereat, or we drink too much alcohol, or we smoke more, or we're just irritable and we just want to hit somebody. And we have these feelings, but really these are all symptoms of either frustration or anger that we have not been able to label for ourselves. And so what we need to do is learn to understand those symptoms, those that we feel, and understand that they're feelings. And so if you become frustrated, angry, whatever emotion, negative emotion that is upsetting to us, I mean, I do this all the time. Try counting from 1 to 10 slowly. It just buys you time. It buys you time for, when we talked about emotion focused, problem solve, the coping styles, to reframe things in our minds. Call a friend, pray, meditate, sing, listen to music, take a bath, whatever just breaks that cycle of negativity that you're feeling. And in an ideal situation, try to find time, 10 minutes every day, to be in place and be in a quiet place and just take some slow, deep breaths and relax. It takes patience, but it works. The difficulty with that is sometimes when we sit down and we breathe and relax is when that flood of emotions appears and come to us. And we have to be prepared to live with those emotions. And that's the other piece. Because we have negative emotions, it does not mean we should shove them away, because there's no way out of anything. It's only through these emotions that we grow, that things change. It's part of being human. having emotions. And we don't need to fight every emotion. And sometimes when we do deep breathing, when we relax, we find that these feelings that come to the surface, then we could use and work with them. I mean, this is what, when we talk about emotional intelligence, emotionally intelligent people can manage their emotions. And that's really pretty much the difference between successful people and not successful people. And by successful, I don't mean money successful. I mean people with successful relationships. When we realize the impact of our emotions, that we don't just lash out at people, we don't say what's on our mind, that we think thoughtfully what it is that we say, especially to the people that we love, to our family members, parents, children, siblings, spouses. The third strategy I'm going to give you is family rules. We all have our family rules in our families, who does what, and everybody's rules seem to be set in stone. Think about who's allowed to do what in your family. Do you work as a team, or is it all on you? Question these rules, because they can change. There's some unspoken rules in your family. So I'm going to tell you again, going back to my personal experience. When my father died, it's just my brother and I. My brother's a lot younger. He's a terrific guy. I love him dearly. But he's always been the baby of the family. So I don't expect him to do much of anything, because I've always done it all, because I'm the oldest. And I was thinking to myself, he's not such a baby anymore. He's a competent person. And maybe it's time for the rules to change. And so I said to him, can we split some of these tasks? Will you be able to do this and this and this and this, and I'll do that? And to my surprise, even though initially he was surprised I would ask, because it's always been, he had it easy because I took control of things, he's been doing them. And I keep checking on him, and it's like, did you do this? He goes, done. And I'm like, wow. So again, these are family rules. Maybe when we were young, this was the case, but we're adults now. And so keep rechecking the rules in your family and ask for help. And a lot of people find it hard to ask for help, and people feel like they should do everything themselves, and people feel like no one will help even if they ask. And truthfully, people want to help for the most part, even within our families. And this was a revelation to me, that my brother wanted to be involved. And yes, it was easier when I did it all, but that didn't mean that he didn't want to be involved and help. All I had to do was ask. Of course, when I asked, the negative piece of it is that he could say no, and I feel rejected. But he also said yes and is doing a lot of things. So ask, join a community. You have that in your congregation. And always speak to your doctor if you're feeling you can't cope well with it. And I'm not even going to go into self-care, because we all know what we should be doing. It's hard to do these things. We all try. But what I've been thinking more and more lately is this idea of building a community of care. So if we are feeling stressed, instead of thinking, what can I do for myself to take care of myself, to think of, how can I have within my community, ask for help and get support, and not feel so lonely. And the last comment I'm going to make, and then we'll move to questions, is that if you feel that even with all these techniques, you're depressed, you're sick, you feel hopeless, you feel like hurting yourself or hurting others, you're drinking too much or using drugs, you're fighting with your family, you're not looking after yourself. And this is generally with memory loss, but it applies to every relationship and every one of us. Please go speak to your family doctor, a healthcare provider, because you could be depressed and you may need medical help. So I'm going to stop the screen share, and I'm opening it up for questions, comments.
At the moment, Adriana, there are no questions. I think everyone is pondering and thinking and digesting a lot of what you said. But, if there is anybody who has a question, please, you can unmute yourself and ask it, or you can write it in the chat, and I can read it to Adriana. So if there are any questions, this is your opportunity, to ask them. I know personally, listening to all of it and listening to your sandwich, all the different sandwiches, I'd never thought of it that way. And I would imagine that all of us are somewhere in there. We've all been one type of sandwich or another, or we move from one to another. Does this help having a clearer understanding of this as we age and we get to be the one that needs the care, as long as there isn't, some dementia or something?
Mhm.
Does that help?
I think it always helps to normalize things. We feel like we're so alone and unique and only us need care, whatever. And it's a human experience for the most part. And if we all live long enough, we'll all need care and support for the most part of some kind or another. So I think normalizing really helps. It's part of, in North America, we live in a very individualistic society where we feel we must all do everything ourselves. Most of the world is very different. Dependence on others is encouraged because it's needed, because we're not islands, so that it's okay to ask for help. Because why wouldn't we ask for help? And so we're not unique. We all live through some type of sandwich or another at some point in our lives. And so when it's us needing the help and the support, we need to ask people, because we never know what the answer will be, first of all. And normalizing it and even realizing in Canada and North America, there's something wrong about asking, we should be independent. God forbid I ask my daughter to drive me whatever, because whatever, In other parts of the world, it's expected. And we're not going to change society per se, but if we can only understand that for the most part, most of us have at least some family members that care about us, and we know who we can count on and who is not as available right now. We need to use those relationships. And by using, I don't mean in like a using way, but in like, it's normalize it. It's okay to ask for help from people.
A question from Stan is, when the parent refuses help due to dementia, how do we deal with that?
It's very hard, because that's very common, because most people are proud and they don't want to ask for help, and they may not have the insight if they have dementia that they need help. So they may be feeling, why are you interfering in my life? I'm perfectly fine, when they're not, because a hallmark of dementia is that you don't realize the difficulties that you're experiencing. So you have to try. And it depends on the level of dementia. You have to sometimes do it in a kind of way that they don't realize you're helping, right? So maybe if they don't want your help, but they accept their their grandchild's help, and find ways around it. And sometimes, unfortunately, you have to wait for a crisis to happen because some people will not let you help them. And so sometimes you can't help until there's a crisis, and then you can finally intervene. So it depends. There's not one answer to that. It depends on the level of dementia and the relationship you have with them.
Another question is, where do you get help for the sandwich child or parent, but you don't have coverage of insurance? And you did talk a little bit about the costs, but
it's a problem. It's a real problem because mental health and supports are not really widely available and free in Toronto. And there's long waiting lists for those that are free. So Baycrest, depending on if you're associated to a particular program, medical program, there may be social workers in that program. Circle of Care is free. They have some supports through the Battelle Center. I'm just trying to think in this area. Jewish Family and Child Service has a sliding fee guide, but it's very hard to get free, unfortunately.
Can I just comment something?
Okay.
Can I just comment? I just want to tell you that as an educator myself, I want to give you an A+. You were absolutely excellent, touched every problem with the answer that I was amazed with it. Excellent, very good.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
One last question that we have is, and you mentioned it a little bit in the relationship you had with your brother, but this is a little bit different. What do you do if only one daughter helps with the parent who is alone, and the parent counts on that one child the most, and the other siblings don't help at all and play victim?
Well, this is the bread and butter. This is how I made my living. This is so common. There's always that one child that does it all. And that's just what is. And those are dynamics that have happened. For the most part, the parents created a lot of these dynamics growing up. They didn't just evolve out of nowhere later in age. But there's also people's circumstances. I always call it the son from California. One lives far away, and the other one, I have young children, and the other one, I work all the time. It always seems to fall on that one child. And partly it's up to that adult child to decide how they want to manage things. Sometimes, and I've had many sessions in my office with family, adult children. I always say that adult children, they're 50, 60, 70s, even sometimes these days, they behave like 5-year-olds in your office. But mommy, and she did the, and people, we all regress when we're with our siblings, and it's about our parents. And all dynamics come back up to haunt us. Partly is if you want help. There's a difference between I'm resentful, I've had it, why don't you ever have to do it, and why it's me, I'm washing my hands, as opposed to doing a more grown-up kind of thing is like, how am I going to engage my siblings to help me? And sometimes it's finding their strengths. So my brother, who's really good with numbers, I'm going to say, any way, any chance that you could handle paying the bills. Or what can you do? My sister, who really likes to go to the mall and go for coffee and is never around, I could say, is there any way that you could take mom once a week for coffee to give me a bit of a break? Or ask them, I can't do it all. Is there anything you could do to help around mom? And not expect that people are going to do what you're doing, because that's unrealistic. Because the alternative is for you to wash your hands and say, I've had it. And that is not necessarily the best solution either. Right? So it depends on the family. Sometimes having a social worker, a mediator, somebody who can kind of delegate things, but if not, just creating a list. These are the tasks that must happen for our parents. Who can do what when, and create a calendar. On Mondays, you go, on Tuesdays, you go, Thursdays, you go, you do the bills, I'll do the shopping or whatever. And then regularly assessing, is this working or not? But again, it's this thing is you have to ask for help. And then if your siblings say you're on your own, it's your choice. You don't have to do that, you know, then it is your choice. And it's something that you have to live with yourself, you know, if you don't do it, if nobody else does it, can you live with yourself? And if you can delegate some of those portions to, if there's money to hire somebody. So it depends on each situation, but we all need to be aware of what we can do. You know, there's this kind of like, I may resent my siblings for not helping out. I'm really jealous of them because I wish I didn't have to help out. But I'm still going to do it. Or I only have 4 hours a week. There's so much emotional space I have. And this is as much as I can do. And the rest, you know, we'll wait for a crisis. So again, there's no right answer, and it depends on your family, but ask for help and ask to divvy up tasks and be concrete with the kinds of help that you ask people. If, for example, I'm busy with mom and I'm leaving my dog by himself all day. Could you at least come by my house and walk my dog so that I can be with mom? That may be more palatable to my sister, perhaps, right?
Adriana, thank you so much. I don't want to keep you too, we've gone over just a little bit. You have outlined issues. You have given us strategies. You have given us language to identify our feelings, which I know for me, and I would imagine for others, helps clarify it and helps give permission to do some of these things and when I'm caught in this, what do I do about it? And now there are a number of very concrete ways, and even if it's just sitting back and thinking it through. So I certainly thank you for what you have shared with us. I also want to send our condolences to you on the loss of your father so very recently, and that you did this. That's tough to do, so we do thank you. I hope his memory will, you know, be of a blessing for you. Thank you so much. It's been a wonderful, wonderful experience having you speak with us. Thank you.
It's my pleasure, and it's thank you so much for giving me this opportunity to talk and share about something that's really important for me, and not the death and the loss of my father, but helping people cope with being human, relationships, and families.
Thank you.
Thank you, and good night to everybody.
Good night.
Okay, bye-bye.